Granite County, Montana Territory. June 1894. While every homesteader in the valley was building beds that held their families up in cold air, Grigory Zhukov was doing something that made his neighbors walk over just to tell him he was wasting good cabin space. The Russian exile was building a massive stone bench directly against the wall behind his firebox, 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, 2 feet high, with a hollow channel running through its core. The Russian is building furniture out of rocks. Must have frozen his brain in Siberia. Nobody understood what Grigory knew about heated sleeping surfaces that would have his children fighting over who got to sleep closest to the firebox end. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Grigory Zhukov had spent 17 years sleeping on heated stone before the Tsar's police sent him to Siberia, and another 11 years sleeping on heated stone while he served his sentence there. Born in a village in the Ural Mountains where winter lasted 8 months and firewood was too precious to burn all night, he grew up in a home where the sleeping bench was the center of family life. The lezhanka, the heated masonry platform built against the great stove, was where his grandmother told stories, where his mother nursed sick children back to health, where the entire family gathered on the coldest nights to share warmth radiating up through wool blankets from stone that remembered the evening fire. His grandfather had built their family's lezhanka the year before Grigory was born. The old man had explained the principle many times. Americans heat the air and wonder why they freeze. Russians heat the stone and wonder why Americans are so foolish. Air forgets warmth the moment the fire dies. Stone remembers warmth until the next fire is lit. You cannot sleep in warm air. Air moves, air escapes, air betrays you. But you can sleep on warm stone. Stone stays. Stone holds. Stone keeps its promises through the night. The sleeping bench in his childhood home was massive, 4 feet wide, 10 feet long, built of fire brick faced with smooth clay plaster. A secondary flue channel from the great stove ran through its hollow interior, and the smoke surrendered its heat to the masonry as it passed. By evening, the surface reached body temperature or slightly above. The family slept layered on wool blankets spread across the warm stone, and even when January brought 40 below, even when ice formed on the water bucket across the room, no one shivered. The stone held them. The stone kept its promise. Siberian exile had only reinforced what Grigory already knew. The Katorga prison barracks were brutal, log walls that leaked wind, temperatures that killed men who slept on wooden bunks raised in the frozen air. But the Russian guards understood the lezhanka. Every barracks had a great brick stove with a sleeping platform, and prisoners fought for position the way his own children would fight decades later in Montana. The spots nearest the firebox end were warmest. The spots at the far end were merely tolerable. The wooden bunks along the walls were death sentences after midnight. Grigory survived 11 years of Siberian exile because he understood that heat was not about air temperature. Heat was about contact. A man lying on a surface at 95 degrees could survive air at 30 degrees indefinitely. The body gained warmth from below faster than it lost warmth to the air above. This was physics. This was survival. This was knowledge that Western Europeans and Americans had somehow never learned. He emigrated to America in 1891 after his sentence ended, following rumors of land available to anyone willing to work it. He married Nadia in San Francisco, a woman from Vladivostok who had grown up with the same heated benches, the same understanding that stone was a better sleeping companion than air. They moved inland, seeking farmland, finally filing their homestead claim in Granite County, Montana Territory in the spring of 1893. Their first winter in a conventional American cabin nearly killed them. The cast iron stove heated air that rose to the ceiling and stayed there. The family slept on rope beds raised 18 inches above a floor that froze solid every night. The children coughed. Nadia developed a chest cold that lasted until March. Grigory lay awake, calculating how many BTUs rose uselessly to the roof, while his family shivered in beds suspended in the coldest air in the cabin. We build the lezhanka this summer, Grigory told Nadia in April. No more sleeping in cold air. We sleep on warm stone like civilized people. The argument with Nadia never happened. She had grown up in the same Russian tradition, slept on the same heated platforms, understood the same physics of contact warmth that Grigory understood. "Show me where the lezhanka will stand," she said, walking the cabin with him in late April. Grigory pointed to the wall behind the existing stove. "Here." The bench builds directly against this wall, sharing the back of the firebox, 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, 2 feet high. The secondary flue channel exits the firebox low, runs through the hollow core of the bench the full 8 feet, then turns upward into the chimney. Smoke passes through stone for 8 feet before escaping. Every inch of that passage surrenders heat to the masonry. By evening, the surface reaches 100 degrees. We sleep on that surface, and the air temperature becomes irrelevant. And the children? All 5 of us on 8 feet? More than enough. We sleep across the width, not the length. Heads at the wall, feet toward the room. 8 feet of length gives each of us nearly 20 inches of space. The children will fight for the end nearest the firebox. That end runs hottest. We take the cooler end and let them have the warmest spots. Word reached the neighboring homesteads within weeks. Clement Treadway, the American rancher who owned property to the south, walked over on a Saturday afternoon to see if the rumors were true. He found Grigory hauling stone from a creek bed 2 miles east, flat pieces stacked in his wagon, mortar sand piled beside the cabin. "Zhukov," Treadway called from the fence line. "Folks in town are saying you're building some kind of stone furniture inside your cabin. A bench made of rocks that takes up half your floor space. That can't be right." Grigory set down the stone he was carrying and wiped dust from his beard. "Not furniture, a sleeping platform, heated from inside by the stove's flue gases. The stone absorbs heat all day and releases it all night. We sleep on the warm surface instead of in cold air. Every Russian home has this. Every Chinese home in the north has this. Only Americans sleep suspended in freezing air and wonder why they wake up cold." A heated bench. Treadway shook his head slowly. "Man, that's 24 square feet of floor space gone. In a cabin this size, that's a quarter of your living area. You're trading room for rocks. I'm trading cold for warmth. A bed takes the same floor space and gives nothing back. The lezhanka takes the same space and heats the family. We gain, not lose. And when that stone cools? When the fire dies and you're lying on cold rock instead of cold air? The stone does not cool. 7,000 pounds of mass heated to 100 degrees holds warmth until the next evening's fire. The surface drops perhaps 10 degrees overnight, from 100 to 90, still warmer than any bed, still warmer than the air, still warmer than your family sleeping 18 inches above a frozen floor." Treadway turned to leave. "Your cabin, your mistake. But when you're lying on a slab of cold rock in January wishing you had a proper bed, don't say nobody told you that Americans know how to build furniture." Nadia watched him walk away, then looked at her husband standing among the stones that would hold their family through winter. "He thinks a bed is furniture, and a lezhanka is foolishness. He doesn't understand that we don't sleep on furniture. We sleep on warmth. He suspends his family in the coldest air in the cabin and wonders why they shiver. We will lie on warm stone and wonder why anyone ever did it differently." Grigory lifted another stone. "By January, when his children cough and ours sleep soundly, he will understand." What Grigory Zhukov understood from 28 years of sleeping on heated stone, modern thermal engineers would later quantify with precision. But the principles he was applying had been tested through 2,000 years of construction across Russia, China, Korea, and every northern culture that understood the difference between heating air and heating bodies. The fundamental insight was this: Human thermal comfort depends on heat transfer, not air temperature. A person lying in a bed suspended in air loses heat through three mechanisms: conduction to the mattress, convection to surrounding air, and radiation to cold surfaces. In a cabin at 40 degrees, a person in a bed loses approximately 300 BTUs per hour to these combined pathways. The body must generate this heat continuously to maintain core temperature. Sleep becomes shallow. The body shivers. The sleeper wakes exhausted from the metabolic effort of staying warm. A person lying on a surface at 100 degrees experiences the opposite physics. Instead of losing heat to the sleeping surface, the body gains heat from it. Conduction reverses direction. The warm stone delivers approximately 200 BTUs per hour into the body through direct contact. Now, the combined equation changes dramatically. The person gains heat from below while losing heat to air above. The net result can be zero heat loss or even net heat gain, even when cabin air drops to 40 degrees or below. This was why the Russian lezhanka and the Chinese kang had heated 80% of northern homes for millennia. The system didn't require heating an entire cabin to comfortable temperature. It required heating only the surface where humans actually slept. The stone bench Grigori planned contained approximately 48 cubic feet of dense masonry, weighing roughly 7,000 pounds. With a specific heat capacity of 0.2 British thermal units per pound per degree Fahrenheit, this mass heated to 100 degrees above a 50-degree baseline, stored approximately 140,000 BTUs of thermal energy. The sleeping surface lost heat to cabin air at a rate determined by the temperature differential and the surface area. At 24 square feet of exposed surface with a 50-degree differential, losses ran approximately 4,000 to 5,000 BTUs per hour. This meant the bench could maintain sleeping temperature for 25 to 30 hours after the fire died. Far longer than any single night required. The flue channel running through the bench core was critical to the design. A conventional stove exhausted flue gases directly up the chimney at temperatures of 400 to 600 degrees. This represented massive wasted energy, heat literally flying out of the building. By routing those gases through 8 feet of masonry before they reached the chimney, the system captured 60 to 70% of that waste heat. Gases entered the bench channel at 500 degrees and exited to the chimney at perhaps 150 degrees. The missing 350 degrees now lived in the stone. The surface temperature of 95 to 105 degrees was carefully calibrated by centuries of Russian experience. Below 90 degrees, the surface felt merely warm and provided insufficient heat transfer. Above 110 degrees, the surface became uncomfortable for extended contact. The ideal range, body temperature to slightly above, felt warm without causing sweating, comfortable for hours of sleep, and maintained the gentle heat transfer that kept sleepers warm without overheating them. Grigori's neighbors slept on beds suspended in the coldest stratum of cabin air, the layer nearest the floor where cold accumulated while heat rose to the ceiling. They heated their entire cabin to 60 degrees and still woke cold because they were radiating heat into air and losing it through their mattresses. Grigori would heat only the surface where his family actually slept. The cabin air could drop to 40 degrees. It wouldn't matter. His family would be lying on 100 degrees, gaining heat instead of losing it. Construction began the first week of June, with spring warmth softening the frozen Montana soil, and Grigori eager to complete the lezhanka before autumn brought the first hard frosts. He started with the foundation. The bench would weigh over 7,000 pounds when complete, far too heavy for the existing cabin floor to support. Grigori cut away the floorboards along the back wall, excavated 18 inches of earth, and laid a foundation of flat stones mortared with lime and sand. This base spread the weight across the ground beneath, preventing settling that would crack the masonry above. The firebox modification came next. His existing cast iron stove sat against the front wall, its pipe running straight up through the roof. Grigori built a new firebox of fire brick directly against the back wall, larger than the cast iron stove, designed to burn hotter and produce more sustained heat. The critical feature was the secondary flue outlet positioned low on the back of the firebox, 8 inches square, opening directly into where the bench would stand. The bench walls rose from the foundation in careful courses. Grigori used dense granite collected from the creek bed, stones with flat faces that stacked tightly with minimal mortar. The outer walls reached 2 feet high, 3 feet wide, 8 feet long. He left the interior hollow, creating a channel that ran the full length of the bench from the firebox end to the chimney end. The flue channel itself required precise construction. Grigori built interior walls of fire brick to contain the hottest gases, leaving a passage 10 inches wide and 12 inches tall running through the bench core. The channel followed a serpentine path, entering from the firebox at one end, running 4 feet, turning back on itself, running 4 feet in the opposite direction, then turning upward into a vertical chimney stack at the far end. This doubled the contact length between hot gases and masonry, extracting maximum heat before exhaust escaped. The benchtop demanded the smoothest stones he could find. Grigori selected flat granite slabs 2 to 3 inches thick, fitting them tightly across the top of the bench walls and mortaring every joint. The surface had to be smooth enough for comfortable sleeping, sealed enough to prevent smoke from seeping into the cabin, and thick enough to distribute heat evenly, rather than creating hot spots above the flue channel. A final layer of clay plaster, mixed with sand and straw in the Russian tradition, covered the entire bench surface. Nadia applied this coating, working it smooth with wet hands the way her grandmother had taught her. The clay sealed every gap, softened every rough edge, and created the sleeping surface that would hold the family through winter. The chimney rose from the far end of the bench, built of the same granite as the bench itself. Where a conventional stovepipe would have carried 500-degree gases directly out of the cabin, this chimney received gases that had already surrendered most of their heat to the bench masonry. The exhaust rose slowly, almost lazily, having done its work before reaching open air. Grigori built the first test fire on August 20th, a modest blaze to cure the mortar and check for smoke leaks. He watched the joints carefully as the firebox heated, looking for any wisp of gray that would indicate a gap in the bench top. None appeared. The system was tight. After 2 hours of burning, he pressed his palm to the bench surface at the firebox end. Warm. Distinctly warm. Perhaps 80 degrees. He pressed his palm to the far end. Cooler, but warming. The heat was moving through the masonry, following the flue channel, filling the stone with stored energy. By tonight, Grigori told Nadia, the surface will reach 100 degrees. By morning, it will still hold 90. We will sleep on summer warmth while winter rages outside. By late September, the Zhukov sleeping bench had become the most discussed construction in Granite County. The autumn curiosity had shifted into something closer to genuine mockery, as temperatures dropped and neighbors realized the Russian family was actually planning to sleep on a stone slab instead of proper beds. It's some kind of peasant foolishness, one rancher's wife declared at the general store in Phillipsburg. A stone platform where the family sleeps piled together like animals. They've given up a quarter of their cabin for a rock shelf. The man has brought Siberian prison habits to Montana. The practical objections multiplied as the first frosts arrived. Clement Treadway walked over in early October with new concerns, his breath visible in the cold morning air. "Zhukov," Treadway called from outside the cabin. "I've been thinking about your arrangement. Stone is cold by nature. Everyone knows that. You touch stone in summer and it's cool. Come January, that bench will be pulling heat out of your family, not putting it in." Grigori had anticipated this. Stone feels cold in summer because it holds winter's memory. The same property that makes it feel cold in summer makes it hold heat in winter. I heat the stone through the flue channel. The stone reaches 100 degrees. My family lies on 100 degrees. The stone gives heat to us, not the other way. 100 degrees. That's boiling water temperature, Zhukov. You'll burn your children. 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Boiling is 212. 100 feels warm to the touch. Warmer than the body, comfortable for sleeping. Every Russian child grows up sleeping on the lezhanka. No one burns. Everyone sleeps warm. Birger Onsrud, the Norwegian farmer who lived 3 miles east, visited in mid-October. Unlike the American skeptics, Onsrud understood something about masonry heating. Norwegian homes featured massive stone fireplaces designed to radiate warmth. His concern was different. "I have seen heated masonry before," Onsrud said, examining the bench surface from inside the cabin. "But for warming the room, not for sleeping on directly. Your family will lie on this stone all night? The pressure on the body, the hardness, surely this cannot be comfortable." Wool blankets and sheepskins pad the surface. We do not lie on bare stone. We lie on bedding spread across warm stone. The warmth rises through the padding. The padding provides softness, better than any mattress suspended in cold air. And when you must rise in the night? When a child needs tending? We rise. We tend. We return to warmth. The stone does not cool while we are gone. It holds its temperature for hours. The child returns to the same warmth they left. The first hard frost came October 15th. Temperatures dropped to 22 degrees overnight. Grigory built an evening fire in the firebox, letting it burn hot for 3 hours before banking the coals. By bedtime, the bench surface at the firebox end registered 103 degrees. The far end held 91 degrees. The family spread wool blankets across the surface and lay down in their sleeping arrangement. The 3 children at the warm end, Grigory and Nadia at the cooler end. 6-year-old Ilya pressed himself against the wall where the firebox radiated directly through the stone. 9-year-old Daria tried to claim the same spot. 12-year-old Timofey wedged between them, all 3 jostling for position nearest the heat. "The warmest spot is mine," Ilya declared in Russian, refusing to yield his position against the wall. "You had it last night," Daria protested. "Tonight it's my turn." Nadia looked at Grigory with an expression somewhere between exasperation and satisfaction. "They're fighting over position," she said quietly. "Like we did as children. Like every Russian child since the first lezhanka was built." That is how you know it works. January 1895 arrived with brutality that old-timers in Granite County would reference for decades. An Arctic system descended from Canada on January 7th, driving temperatures from a manageable 18 degrees to 34 below zero by midnight. Dawn on January 8th brought 39 below. By the morning of January 12th, the thermometer outside the assay office in Phillipsburg read 43 degrees below zero. Wind screamed down the valley at 20 miles per hour, finding every cabin that stood exposed, every bed suspended in cold air, every family that had trusted walls and stoves to keep them warm. Conventional homesteads suffered first and worst. Clement Treadway's ranch house ran its iron stove at full roar around the clock. His wife fed it in shifts through the frozen darkness, stumbling from bed every 2 hours to keep flames alive. The stove glowed cherry red. The ceiling held 70 degrees. But the floor, where cold air pooled and accumulated, held 19 degrees. The beds, suspended 18 inches above that frozen floor, sat in air that never climbed above 40. His children slept in every piece of clothing they owned, wrapped in blankets that could not stop the cold from pressing in from every direction. They woke shivering at 2 in the morning, again at 4, again at dawn. Exhausted from fighting temperatures their beds could not defeat. Birger Onsrud's cabin fared marginally better. Norwegian construction habits had made his walls tighter, but the physics remained the same. Heat rose. Cold sank. His family slept in beds positioned in the coldest stratum of the cabin, gaining nothing from the hot air that pooled uselessly at the ceiling 8 feet above their heads. His youngest daughter developed the rattling cough that came from breathing air that hovered near freezing all night while her body fought to maintain core temperature. A bachelor homesteader named Crow was found dead in his cabin on January 14th, frozen in a bed 6 feet from a stove that had burned out while he slept. The stove sat cold. The bed sat colder. The man had died not from lack of fuel but from lack of contact, his body suspended in freezing air, radiating heat into the void, with nothing beneath him to give warmth back. Throughout the valley, families woke exhausted from nights spent shivering in beds that gave them nothing. They burned through wood piles at terrifying rates, heating ceiling air that did nothing for bodies lying below. The warmest place in every cabin was the place no human occupied. The coldest place was exactly where they slept. Nobody thought about the Zhukov family during those desperate days. The Russians with their strange stone bench were assumed to be either managing like everyone else or suffering worse. Surely a family sleeping on rocks would freeze before anyone. On the morning of January 12th, the coldest day of the cold snap, Grigory Zhukov woke to find the bench surface at 92 degrees. The cabin air had dropped to 38 degrees overnight, brutal by any standard. Frost coated the windows. Ice had formed in the water bucket across the room, but the bench held its warmth. The stone had absorbed the previous evening's fire and refused to surrender it. The surface that had reached 104 degrees at bedtime had dropped only 12 degrees in 10 hours. The children lay tangled together at the warm end, Ilya still pressed against the wall nearest the firebox, Darya's arm thrown across her younger brother, Timofey curled at the edge. None of them shivered. None of them wore coats. None of them had woken at 2 or 4 or dawn because their bodies had never stopped gaining heat from the surface beneath them. Nadia pressed her palm to the stone beside her. "Still warm," she said quietly. "The air freezes and the stone remembers. That is what stone does. Stone keeps its promises." Clement Treadway reached the Zhukov homestead just after noon on January 15th. The ride had taken nearly 2 hours through cold that froze the moisture in his nostrils with every breath. His face was raw beneath 2 scarves wrapped tight. His fingers ached inside 3 pairs of gloves layered one over another, but the cold was not why he had come. His family was exhausted. His wife had not slept more than 2 hours consecutively in 8 days. His children woke crying from cold every night, their beds offering no protection against air that stayed below 40 degrees, even with the stove burning full. He had burned through half his winter wood pile already, feeding a fire that heated the ceiling while his family froze below. Something was terribly wrong with how Americans slept, and the Russian family with their strange stone bench seemed to be the only homesteaders in the valley who were not suffering. The first thing he noticed was the smoke. The chimney showed only modest output, not the thick column of a stove running at full roar, but the lazy drift of a fire banked low. The Zhukovs were not burning desperately. They were burning casually. The second thing he noticed was the sound. As he approached the cabin door, he heard children laughing. Not coughing, not crying, not the restless whimpering of cold, weakened bodies. Laughing. Playing. Nadia opened the door before he knocked. What came through that doorway stopped Clement Treadway where he stood. Warmth. Not the fierce blast of a stove running hot, but a gentle, steady warmth that seemed to radiate from everywhere and nowhere. The cabin air was cool, perhaps 45 degrees, but the warmth came from below, from the stone. "Come in," Nadia said calmly, "before you freeze." Treadway stepped through, and Grigory closed the door behind him. The 3 children sat on the great stone bench against the back wall, playing a game with wooden blocks. They wore light wool shirts, no coats, no blankets wrapped around their shoulders. They sat on the stone as casually as Treadway's children sat on chairs. "Touch the bench," Grigory said simply. Treadway walked to the stone platform and pressed his palm flat against the surface. His eyebrows rose before his mouth could form words. "That's warm. The stone is warm. 94 degrees this morning at dawn. 14 hours after I built last night's fire. The fire's been out 14 hours and the stone is still warm? The stone holds 140,000 BTUs. It loses perhaps 5,000 per hour to the cabin air. Do the mathematics. 28 hours of warmth from a single evening fire. The surface drops 10 degrees overnight, from 100 to 90. Still warmer than any bed. Still warmer than any air. My children sleep on 90 degrees and wake on 90 degrees. Treadway knelt and pressed both palms flat, then his forearms, feeling the heat soak into his frozen body. The stone was warmer than his own bed had been at any point in the last 2 weeks. Warmer than the air near his stove. Warmer than anything in his cabin except the stove surface itself. My children haven't slept through the night since the cold snap started, Treadway said quietly. They wake shivering every few hours. My wife hasn't slept a full night in over a week. Your children sleep in cold air on cold beds. My children sleep on warm stone. The difference is not comfort. The difference is physics. A body on a warm surface gains heat. A body in cold air loses heat. Your family fights thermodynamics every night. Mine cooperates with it. Treadway stood slowly, still feeling the warmth in his palms. Show me, he said. Show me how to build this. The morning after the cold snap broke, Grigori stepped outside into air that had warmed to a merely brutal 12 below zero. The landscape lay white and silent. Drifts piled against every structure, smoke rising from every chimney except his own, which had not needed a fire since the previous evening, because the bench still held 87 degrees from the night before. He walked his property checking for damage and found little. The small barn where his 2 horses and milk cow sheltered was cold but functional. His woodpile stood half full, not half empty like his neighbors, who had burned through reserves at twice the normal rate, trying to keep ceiling air warm while their families froze in beds below. What Grigori noticed most was the silence that preceded the visitors. Then the footsteps in the snow. Clement Treadway arrived first, walking rather than riding, his horse too exhausted from the cold to carry a rider through the drifts. Treadway's face was raw beneath his beard, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights spent feeding a stove that could not keep his family warm. My children haven't slept through the night in a week, Treadway said without greeting. My wife is coughing. My woodpile is nearly gone. We've been burning fuel day and night and waking up frozen anyway. He paused, looking at the cabin with new eyes. Your chimney's cold. You haven't had a fire since yesterday. We haven't needed one. The bench holds warmth from the evening fire. We sleep on 90 degrees while the air drops to 40. The air temperature doesn't matter when the sleeping surface stays warm. Show me. Grigori led him inside. The cabin air was cold, noticeably cold, perhaps 42 degrees. Treadway's breath condensed. His hands sought his pockets instinctively. Then Grigori pressed his palm to the bench surface and gestured for Treadway to do the same. Treadway pressed his palm flat against the stone. His eyebrows rose before he could stop them. That's warm. That's genuinely warm. 89 degrees this morning, 12 hours after the fire died. My children slept in their underclothes. Your children slept in coats and boots and still woke shivering. Birger Onsrud arrived an hour later, having heard from a passing neighbor that the Russian family had survived the cold snap without burning their cabin down. He found Treadway still inside, still pressing his palm to the bench, still trying to understand how stone could hold heat while beds held nothing. The flue gases pass through the interior channel, Grigori explained, tracing the path with his finger. 8 feet of contact with 7,000 pounds of stone. The gases enter at 500 degrees and exit at 150. The missing heat lives in the stone. The stone releases it slowly, 4,000 BTUs per hour across the surface. 25 hours of warmth from a single evening fire. 25 hours, Onsrud repeated. You could skip a day of heating entirely. We often do. Build a fire in the evening, sleep warm through the night, skip the morning fire, build another fire the following evening. Half the wood. Double the warmth. No waking at midnight to feed a stove that cannot keep you warm anyway. Treadway straightened slowly, his palm reluctant to leave the warm stone. I've been heating the ceiling for 5 winters while my family froze in beds below. Every BTU rising up where no one sleeps while my children shiver 18 inches above a frozen floor. Americans heat the air and wonder why they freeze. Russians heat the stone and wonder why Americans are so foolish. Grigory rested his hand on the bench that had held his family through the worst winter Montana could deliver. My grandfather said this. His grandfather said this. 50 generations of Russians sleeping warm while the air freezes around them. Grigory Zhukov built 4 more sleeping benches before spring. Treadway's was first, constructed in 3 weeks with both men hauling stone from the same creek bed where Grigory had sourced his own. Onsrud's came next, adapted slightly for Norwegian preferences with a wider surface that accommodated his larger family. A German homesteader named Kessler rode 30 miles to see the system after hearing rumors at the Philipsburg General Store and returned home to build his own using the same principles with different materials. Brick instead of granite, but the same flue channel, the same thermal mass, the same physics of contact warmth. By February of 1896, 11 sleeping benches were operating across Granite County. Each one followed Grigory's core specifications: secondary flue channel running through hollow masonry, surface area sufficient for family sleeping, mass adequate to hold warmth through the coldest nights. Some families built benches 3 feet wide, some built 4. The Kessler family built theirs 6 feet wide and slept all 8 children in a row, heads at the wall, feet toward the room, the littlest ones fighting for position nearest the firebox end. The system's most unexpected benefit wasn't warmth. It was wood. A homesteader running a conventional stove through a Montana winter burned 5 to 7 cords of firewood between October and April. The lezhanka required only evening fires, no midnight feedings, no pre-dawn restokings, no desperate burning to keep ceiling air warm while families froze below. Grigory calculated his first winter with the bench at just over 3 cords. Treadway, keeping careful records his second winter, documented 3.5 cords, half what he had burned the year before while sleeping colder. The labor savings alone justified the construction. The hours not spent splitting wood could be spent on repairs, hunting, trading, or simply sleeping through nights that no longer required waking to tend a fire. Families that had staggered through winters exhausted from midnight, stoking now slept 8 hours uninterrupted on surfaces that held warmth without attention. Grigory never charged for his consultations or supervision. When the Philipsburg newspaper ran a short item in March 1896 about unusual sleeping arrangements practiced by Russian settlers in the Western Mountains, Grigory declined to be interviewed. The knowledge wasn't his to sell. It belonged to his grandfather and to every Russian peasant who had built a lezhanka since the first cold winter drove humans to seek warmth from stone. It belonged to the Chinese farmers who had heated their kangs for 2,000 years. It belonged to anyone who had ever looked at a bed suspended in cold air and realized the entire arrangement was upside down. The bench Grigory built stood for 37 years, outlasting the original cabin that surrounded it. When his grandson finally demolished the structure in 1931 to build a modern home with central heating, he kept one granite slab from the sleeping surface, the stone that had held the warmest position nearest the firebox, where Ilya had fought for position as a 6-year-old and slept every winter night until he left home at 17. That stone sits now on the hearth of the family home in Philipsburg, a reminder of the winters when sleeping warm meant sleeping on stone that remembered fire. After Nadia passed in 1918, her daughter found a note tucked into the family Bible, written in Nadia's careful Russian script. They called it a stone bed and said we would freeze. But that stone held us through 30 winters while Americans shivered in their wooden beds. Grigory built what his grandfather taught him, what every Russian village knew for 500 years. You do not sleep in warm air. Air betrays you. You sleep on warm stone. Stone keeps its promises. The children fought for the warmest spot every night. That is how you know you have built something true.